Hey there everyone, it's Scott once again and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about the very underrated 1989 American action film, Blind Fury, which is this film here. It's on a payback time triple feature, which also has Silent Rage with Chuck Norris and a White Line Fever with Jan Michael Vincent. And I haven't seen White Line Fever with Jan Michael Vincent, but I did see Silent Rage and it was a fairly decent flick for Chuck Norris, so yeah. And the picture quality on on two of them look pretty good. I'm sure it's okay for the one for, I believe that one was 1975 for White Line Fever. But anyways, it's Mill Creek Entertainment. They never really put any features on there, not even a trailer. But the picture quality is decent either way you slice it. And I only paid $6 and change for this Blu-ray. So anyway, to be honest, it was a fairly decent price. I don't know if all of them got a separate release, but I believe Blind Fury did. I believe Silent Rage did. Don't know about White Line Fever, but at least two of them, I believe, got a separate release. But anyway, glad to have it. Of course, Blind Fury is the main reason why I got this film. And overall, I really do enjoy this film. I think it's a really great performance for Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer is an actor. He showed that he can be pretty masterful at playing, villains, bad guys, but he can also really show that he can play some really good guys and great characters as well, And this is one of them. And pretty much all the cast do well in their parts. It's considering the fact it's 1989, you have a blind man being a swordsman. That's not always easy, but I think for the time it was handled very well, and I think they did a good job. All the cast, the crew, and then we get to that. The film was directed by Philip Noyce. He did so many films, like I reviewed his Dead Calm already. This is technically 1989, but we didn't get this film until March of 1990. The film was actually produced by Tim Matheson, who's actually an actor himself. I believe this is his only producing credit. And it was also produced by Daniel Gronick, I guess. And then the film was written by Charles Robert Carner, I guess. And then, of course, the film was based on Zatoichi Challenged, which is kind of like an old school samurai story or blind samurai story. Kind of, they're taking influences from that, I assume. So I'm not really familiar with them, but I'm pretty sure they're good little interesting pieces of entertainment. And then the film stars Rutger Hauer as Nick Parker, who's the main character. Then we have Terrence O'Quinn, or really Terry O'Quinn is what he's best known for. Plays Frank Deverell, who is an old army buddy and friend of Nick's. And we have Brandon Call as Billy Deverell, who is Frank's son. Then you have Noble Willingham as our main villain, Claude McCready. You have Lisa Blount, Noble Willingham, and of course Rutger Hauer and Lisa Blount are sadly no longer with us anymore. Lisa Blount plays Annie Winchester, who's actually Frank's girlfriend. Randall Cobb is Slag, or another villain, second most villain. But anyway, he's another villain in the film. You also have Nick Cassavetes as Lyle Pike. He would later go on to be a director. He actually directed, believe it or not, The Notebook. Hard to believe, huh? And then you have Rick Overton as, the Pike's buddy and whatnot, another henchman. Both Nick and Rick play the dumb henchman, pretty much. Then you have Meg Foster, who's only in the beginning, but she's in there as Lynn Deverell, who's actually Frank's ex-wife. And then, of course, you have Sho Kosugi as the assassin, who later Nick faces at some point. And then Charles Cooper as Ed Cobb, another kind of like McCready's assistant, or I guess you can say henchman, but either way you slice it, he's another bad guy. And basically, overall, the plot really follows Rutger Hauer's character, who served in Vietnam, but apparently he was blinded by this explosion, and Frank actually left because he was scared, and as you would later find out. And he was able to Nick was able to encounter all these local villagers who, despite the fact that he remained blind, they were able to, train to master his senses, do all that good stuff, and become an expert swordsman. Like he's able to eventually learn how to chop fruit up pretty well, and they also have to teach him how to hold the sword at a certain point, like this and that, which is kind of interesting. And then years later, he tries to actually reunite with Frank, to make amends and tell him that he actually forgives him. And only to find out that Deverell is missing, and he meets actually, in fact, his ex-wife, which is Meg Foster, Frank's son is Billy, and Meg Foster's Lynn. And then, unfortunately, when they're trying to get, have a conversation, minutes later, Claude McCready's henchman Slag arrives with 2 corrupt police officers, to pretty much kidnap Billy and use his leverage over Frank, because you would find out a little earlier that Frank had some gambling debts, and apparently he was being dangled over the building, and apparently it all caught up with him. But apparently, since he's a chemist, Frank, the character, McCready decides he's going to use him to basically make this drug for him, even though Frank refuses to do so. But they basically Slag is there to grab Billy to use as leverage in case Frank decides to bail out of the deal, pretty much. But of course, Slag also shows that he can be vicious because he kills Lynn's mother, mortally wounding her with his shotgun. But eventually, Nick is able to use his sword fighting skills and actually kills both the police officers. He actually slices a guy's hand off, stabs him in the middle, like in the chest, and he's able to sense him again, actually stabs him to, pretty much kill him for good. And then he's able to have a little interesting fight scene with Slag, and Slag tries to grab for the gun. Nick slices up the legs of the chair off, and actually slices up the cigar at pretty close range, and Slag's able to escape, and even comments in it that, that's not bad for a blind man, but it won't stop no bullet, the butter knife, pretty much. And then eventually, right before Meg Foster's character passes away, she gives Nick a dying wish to take her son to his father, pretty much. And so basically, Nick and Billy, go through a bond, although it's a little rough, but they are able to, overcome it, because they're in Iowa at one point. Then Slag's men come back to try to kidnap him again, but Nick's able to evade them, and they continue on. They eventually get to Nevada, and they encounter his girlfriend Annie, which is Lisa Blount's character. But unfortunately, those 2 dumb henchmen try to kidnap Annie and Nick and Billy, but they're able to outsmart them yet again through the use of certain fire and mist and whatnot. And there's even a fun little sequence where Nick's actually trying to drive, and he's blind as hell, and he angers some people, and eventually he's able to evade the henchmen yet again. So, and eventually they come and stay at both Nick and is able to drop off Annie and Billy at Annie's friend's Colleen's place, and then Nick will try to do his best to rescue Frank, which eventually he does. He's able to cleverly outsmart security. He encounters Cobb and actually threatens him. He actually has this one little scene where he cuts off Cobb's hair, and he tells him, "I also do circumcision." And Cobb's really scared, and he just throws him the keys. And eventually he's able to free Frank, and then eventually they're able to head back to Colleen's. But unfortunately, Colleen has been killed by Slag, as they would find out, because there was a cigar. And eventually they're taken to this... They're basically been kidnapped, both Annie and Billy. They're taken to the McCready's mountain penthouse in exchange, for the drugs, since Frank decides to steal the chemical that to make the specific drug that McCready wants. And then eventually, they both know it's an ambush, and they eventually make some homemade napalm bombs. There's actually a shooting scene where they shoot at the mountain transport that they were in, and they all shoot at it, but they're not in there. That's how they knew it was an ambush, because of their training in the army. Eventually, there's a nice, cool sequence where they are able to take out McCready's men, and eventually they encounter McCready himself. But apparently, earlier Nick encounters the Japanese assassin, which is Shuo Kusagi. They both have a brief little fight. Nick eventually wins that fight, but then Slag is able to shoot at Nick, and that Nick himself is actually able to impale Slag, and eventually Nick's able to slash at him, causing his body to somehow be thrown out, and then he falls down, it splits in half. So I'm wondering if George Lucas saw this film and took that as the inspiration for Darth Maul's death in The Phantom Menace. Anyways, Frank is reunited with his son. Nick decides to move on with his life and continue on his journey, pretty much, and that's how it ends. So overall, I really do enjoy this film. I think it's it not only has great action sequences like I said earlier when Nick is able to take out the corrupt police officers and take on Slag himself. There's also a nice little sequence where they're in Iowa and Slag and his men try to attempt to actually kidnap Billy and put him in this little shed, and there's also men trying to search for him. I like how Nick is able to use a particular sound where he does this, and apparently two of the men kill each other, or at least one of them does, and Nick is able to dispatch them somehow pretty smart in a sense. But anyways, he's able to cut down the shed that Randall, Texas Cobb Slag was on and actually stabs at him. But of course, later on you find out that Slag actually wore a vest of some kind to prevent the knife from going through. And all along, you also have a nice little sequence where Hauer's in MacReady's casino, which I forgot to neglect to mention. That's where he was at. And as a result, he actually uses his little sword thing, little wooden thing, and just pushes two people against them. And then, like I said, he's able to shorten the electricity in the elevator at one point. And those two dumb rednecks that are the wannabe henchmen, one of them says shit, and the other one says fuck, and they both say shit fuck. So it also has moments of levity, like in the very beginning when Nick is back in there. These local Latinos, these Latinos that live in Florida, they try to mess with Nick, like they put hot sauce on there, and he's able to handle it. And then they take this lady's purse, and then when Nick is able to somehow obtain the purse, they demand the purse back, and he's like, "Are you sure it doesn't go with your dress or anything like that?" And then they have this. And then when he takes the knife out, Nick approaches them, and he's actually able to use the wooden part of his where the sword's in. He like knocks him out, kind of in a silly, intentional way, but it was fun. He's like, "What's going on?" And then he does that like he's stabbing them, but he's just poking them. And he knocks pretty much all the guys out that try to circle him or try to take him out. So there's those moments of levity. And there's actually a scene where apparently, since Nick has proven to be a bit of a difficulty for MacReady, he tells Cobb, "Well, get me Bruce Lee." And Cobb's like, "Well, Bruce Lee's dead." "Well, then get me his brother." So yeah. And then there's also moments when there's that rough bonding between Billy and Nick. Like there's a part where when they get off the bus, Nick slips and Billy laughs at him, and then apparently eventually Billy slips as well, and he starts kind of crying. He's like, and laughs, and Nick starts kind of giving him getting back and is laughing at him, saying, "Ha, not for so funny when it's you," pretty much. And then there's a moment where the next thing, Billy decides to try to pretend to give Nick some candy, which in fact is actually a rock, and he puts it in his mouth, and he actually spits it out at Billy's head, saying, you don't fool me," pretty much. And then some other moments, like whenever they try to escape, both Pike and, I guess they're the brothers, both Lyle and Tector. There's a scene where he has to drive because unfortunately Annie glasses get broken and she can't really drive without him, so Nick has to drive. And there's this part where he's going the wrong way pretty much, and this guy's like, "What's your problem, asshole? Are you fucking blind?" And then Nick says, "Yeah, what's your excuse?" And then the guy's like, "Holy shit." And then of course Nick is thinking to himself, "Hey, maybe I ought to get my license." So yeah, there's just some great moments in this film overall. And then there's a part where, like I said, where he faces the assassin. I don't know if I mentioned this before, and he puts his hand on his face. He's like, "Japanese, huh?" So yeah, there's moments like this. I'm trying to remember what kind of levity was also in this. But anyway you slice it, it's definitely a fun movie. Got great action sequences. Like I said before, like I mentioned, whenever he fights Slag, even though he gets shot, Nick's able to impel him, and then of course he's able to somehow use some kind of super swipe speed to somehow swipe at him when in fact he cut him in half, and he's thrown out the window, and when he falls, he's split in half. Because like I said before, I always thought, did George Lucas steal that idea? I don't know, but very well done sequence. I think the music was also decent by J. Peter Robinson, and yeah, I'm actually able to read this. I think I'm trying to remember if it's because Ramble Ralph for Life liked this, that's why I was able to watch it that one time. But yeah, I remember liking this film. And that's why eventually I got it, because I've been wanting to really see if it got a Blu-ray, and eventually it did, but sadly no features. But anyway you slice it, I liked it. So, but anyway, I don't know what else to say. You're in for definitely a fun ride. I don't want to give too much of the movie away. But anyway you slice it, I like this film at the end of the day. It's fun. Like I said, great acting performances by Hauer because of the fact that he stayed committed to doing this. In fact, it was a little difficult, but from what I read, he wrote a book and he said this was one of his favorite roles. Frank does a great job of playing, his friend, even though he felt bad for abandoning Nick. He does kind of help him out in the end, like right after. I forgot to mention, there's this really cool sequence where they're in the dark and there's a scene where he's able to take him out with the sword, Nick's sword, and then apparently he's aided by Frank, who actually throw these napalm bombs, kind of blinding the people, so he ends up helping Nick in the end. There's actually a scene where during that scene he's able to take his samurai and actually go all the way around the guy's head, I wouldn't say decapitating, but he goes to the full throat. And he's able to have a nice little moment how he takes out Cobb, like he's able to use a sword against his groin and then stabs him, and then as he falls down he holds the sword off, and the hat just comes off the sword somehow, which I thought was kind of funny in a way too, so yeah. But it's kind of cool how he took out all the other gang members and henchmen. But yeah. And I don't know. Any way you slice it, I really enjoyed the heck out of this film. And it's definitely great entertainment for sure. Not going to win any Oscars. Kind of wish that maybe they would have expanded on maybe Frank's gambling debts, I guess, was one of the flaws. And it's too bad that maybe Nick couldn't really be with Billy and all that. Because apparently, I guess Billy preferred him. But I think looking back, I think Nick really wanted his son to kind of, spend more time with his father. And feared he would grow, and feared that, Billy would grow more closer to Nick than he would his actual father. So yeah. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a fun, entertaining film. I had no problems with it. Definitely worth owning and viewing, for the first time, I think. But that's my opinion. Okay. Anyway, I think that's going to do it. Hopefully you like this review. Give it a thumbs up. Feel free to like, comment, share, and all that other jazz. So yeah. Okay. I'm going to end it here, and I'll see you in another review. Later.